actually mint clean. Shake it. This is a very exciting morning. I'm up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for the Harley-Davidson homecoming party, and I have been invited on a very, very exclusive tour of the Product Development Center where Harley-Davidson creates their motorcycles. This is a building that holds so many secrets that even people who work within the building do not have access to all of the different areas. So for an outsider to be invited is like a really big deal. From what I hear, last year is the first time they have ever done this, and they've invited just like a select few creators to come see like 1 or 2 areas. And this year they're doing this again, but with like 3 new, never before seen areas. And I get to be one of the creators to go experience this tour. I'm beside myself right now, guys. We're about to go ride out with some other creators. I have a feeling you're gonna recognize a handful of them. I'm gonna bring you guys along to see this very exclusive tour of these never before seen by outsiders rooms of the Harley-Davidson Development Center. Guys, let's go. So I rode out with some other creators and got to meet up with this guy, Matt Swedlin, the man of the hour, kicking off our tour at the Product Development Center.
This is the Product Development Center. This is where everything comes to life at Harley-Davidson, which is awesome. And the chance to be here on top of filming is insanely rare. I think we did it a little bit last year, and that was the first time in forever. And so we got 3 new places that we wanted to show you guys, with the design lab, design team where all the bikes come to life. That's where they're born. Structures lab and the Dyno lab too. So we're gonna show that all to you guys. Let's go get everybody checked in, and then we'll get going.
Wait, one group selfie, everybody.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up? Good morning.
Long time no see. Yeah.
Everywhere, dude. I know. Off our tour today, we're going to see the Dyno Development Wing. This is where they do base engine calibration and performance. Let's go see what they have to say.
It all starts here. This is, if I could, this is where I would live. I love being at the dyno. Making horsepower is my passion. Same with my people. I hire gearheads as well. But we start here when we physically get hardware. So we'll do our predictive work with OE. We'll figure out based on what Dave's looking for. We'll develop what that hardware should look like. We'll get physical parts, and this is the first stop. We get down here, we start running power tests and doing part sorts. Once we have the hardware sorted out, then we get into base cal work. So we'll start going through the calibration side. We'll figure out what air-fuel ratio is best for fuel economy, power, emissions. We'll dial all that in here. Then we do a base dyno durability cal, and as soon as we can, we get these parts over in the other wing and start pounding them through the same basic durability cycle that our wing has. While that's going on, we'll continue developing those maps. And we dive in, we do all the base cal work. Goes out to the vehicle side, they start doing their cal work. While that's going on, we're still running in here, we're still refining, dialing in our torque maps for the control strategies. And then finally we come back in here at the end and we do all our certification testing, our power testing for reporting for regulatory. So we spend a lot of time in the engine dyno, a lot of time in flow room and other places as well, but this is where we get to see the magic happen.
Our state-of-the-art test cells. Each test cell has a 200 horsepower dynamometer. The technician has complete control over the oil temperature, coolant temperature, air speed. We can simulate a dry, hot Arizona day, which can be a kind of a worst case scenario for calibration work. We can actually take a data logger, and we have done this, put a data logger on Kyle Wyman's bike, have him run laps at Road America or Daytona, and we can actually play that data back to the test cell, and the test cell will run that lap. So it's like Kyle Wyman is sitting here running the motorcycle. Very cool stuff. We have complete a view into the combustion chamber of the engine. So we have pressure transducers in the cylinder heads, and we can look at the combustion on a cycle-by-cycle basis. I think we can log up to 72,000 points of data per second. So it's a lot of data, but it gives us a really good idea how the engine is performing. Temperature-wise, horsepower, anything we didn't need to know about the engine, we can see at the test cell. Any questions on that?
Yes, I do. You said you had 4 different fuels.
Yep.
What would be E85?
A regular pump fuel, Indolene, which is a cert fuel for Europe.
Oh.
It's a very controlled chemistry, consistent year-round.
Okay.
The system that's in each test cell is around, I believe it's around $300,000 each system. And it's, like I said, it's an ultra-high-speed system. We're taking data every half degree of the crank revolution. So you multiply that by 10,000 RPMs, doing the math, I think it comes out to like 120,000 samples per second. Per second, because it's speed dependent.
So when we're looking at performance, we're not just looking at a torque number as well, or a power number. We are looking at how the engine's burning. We're looking at each pressure cycle. We're looking for any traces of knock. They talked about the different fuels, so we'll run on premium to do all our development, and then we'll throw in a low octane fuel to simulate areas where you can't get premium, so we can set up our NOx systems so that they work properly. So there's a lot of work that goes into these cells and a lot of engineering hours spent, a lot of data created that our guys get to crunch through along with the OE guys, and we share a lot of information back and forth. The other thing Dan mentioned.
What is your specialty here?
I'm a test engineer. My specialty is durability testing, actually, but I've worked in this area as well. This is a Harley-Davidson test engine that we're doing performance, development, and emissions testing on, coupled to a 200 horsepower dynamometer in the engine test cell. We can control airspeed, air temperature, coolant temperature, oil temperature. We can control everything about the engine while it's under test.
Thank y'all so much. Walking into the component test lab for structures and powertrain.
Yeah, I'm Charlie. I'm a Screaming Eagle engineer. I do a lot of intakes, some exhaust work, and I'm also responsible for oil.
Hi, Tom Pisto. I'm a staff test engineer at Harley-Davidson in the powertrain and full vehicle test labs.
I'm Joe. I'm an engineer with Screaming Eagle. I'm primarily responsible for power cylinder products, so pistons, cylinders, everything that happens, in the combustion chamber, and tuning products.
Phil Court, staff engineer in the vehicle simulation group. In general, 90% of what we do is either components or subsystems, and this test here is the full vehicle. Behind you, there's actually a component test that is running. So more of an example of probably 90% of the work that's done. And then we also have a slideshow just kind of running through a lot of the different variations and stuff of tests that are done. Testing that we do is primarily customer driven, so start off by collecting customer information as far as how they use motorcycles, different environments and stuff, and then we try to reproduce that at our proving grounds, and then we utilize the proving ground information to set up the tests and stuff that we run. So we go from a lifetime of customer use to condense that into like a 3-month time frame in proving grounds, and then our tests are typically like 1 to 3 weeks to do that. So we try to run the lifetime of a component subsystem or full vehicle in that from whatever full lifetime to like 3 weeks. Part of our process actually these days is we try to do as much as we can using CAE tools. So we try to do as much virtually before we actually build the hardware. In the older days, we used to rely on proving grounds to generate failures, and then once we saw them, then we would actually come into the labs and try to fix that stuff. Now we try to do as much as we can virtually, try to understand before we build the parts, so we can do as much minimal rework as possible. The bikes will get instrumented with accelerometers, strain gauges, and various transducers. We'll collect that data and then bring it back in and reproduce the same response that was seen on the proving grounds. On these systems here, we're actually running now before we collect that data, so we have the ability to reproduce the load input without actually collecting the response. So we can test things a lot quicker before full production happens, where they actually run a vehicle at the proving ground. So we can do a chassis frame and things like that months in advance before the bike's actually ready to collect data at the proving grounds. So we try to build the drive files and run them before that. Then kind of through this process, then once we have that, then we do the instrumentation, collect the data, come back and do a correlation. So the same thing. This starts off, this has virtual sensors on it, we'll collect data, and then this goes from driving over a virtual road to this same virtual simulator, and then once we have the bike running on the simulator, we'll collect data from that, then that kind of feeds back into this to optimize the models. And then eventually we get data at the proving grounds, and then we just verify that what we're running in the lab actually does match with what the bike would on the road. So this is just an example of some of the courses that the bike would be run through for the durability testing. And it's actually not even the full input, trying to not completely damage it by running it, but kind of an example of what we see from a test standpoint on the full journal.
Wow.
Any questions?
Is that big thing on top there supposed to be the rider?
Yeah, so we tried different rider weights, so that's actually filled with water, so you can put in different amounts of
that's cool.
weight.
Interesting.
We'll have time for more questions, but we do want to get through talking about the Screaming Eagle products as well.
Yeah, so all parts and accessories are particular for me, Screaming Eagle. How we use that, when they validate the stock airbox, right, everything's fine, stock airbox live, nothing fell off. And then styling wants me to do something like this, and I want this for all the performance. It's going to be a problem, right? When you shake it. Fasteners might break. The whole thing's a lot heavier. So we'll have to take the OE data, shaker data, or I may even send this out to the proving grounds and have them measure a few spots on the heavy breather, come back, make sure the profile, the shaker profile is okay, now run it through the same paces that the OE stuff did, right? So the same durability, so this is as durable or more than the OE airbox. And you learn things along the way with a big heavy air cleaner like this. The fasteners that hold this piece to this piece, I had to bump up a size because they broke. This thing came in the morning, this thing was laying on the ground. That's kind of how we use Screaming Eagle, and we do the same thing for exhausts and all that. Screaming Eagle uses this lab. Next door is the powertrain lab, which is kind of a lot of the same structural testing, the same kind of testing, but on powertrain components. We'll talk about the King 6 transmission and kind of how that went through that lab. And
We can't show you the lab, but a lot of the examples of the tests are on the slideshow. But one of the examples of how we work with the powertrain lab is this King 6 transmission. So the origin of this was originally for the King of the Baggers racing, we had an aftermarket transmission in our bagger bikes. in 22 in one of the races at Daytona, Kyle Wyman was leading, and then the aftermarket transmission, which admittedly was probably being put through paces that were beyond what it was designed for, caused him to miss a shift, and then it ended up blowing out the engine. He was winning and he ended up losing that race because of that missed shift. So that was that sparked the development of this transmission, which started as a racing product and now it is available as a Screaming Eagle product for both Gen 1, Gen 2 Milwaukee A bikes, as well as with some added components, twin cam back in 07. So the advantage compared to the OE transmission, we've added added a high capacity bearing where there wasn't one. Shot keying the gears and shafts for increased durability. Added back cuts on the dog gears to improve the engagement of the gears. Because one of the things that'll get your transmission, that'll fry it, is if you're shifting in the gear, it doesn't fully engage and then it bounces back. That can enough of those and it'll destroy your gears, right? So this will lock it in better with the back cuts. You'll also see we have a blue Dyno coating on the gears and shafts. That's because we produce these on the same line as the OE transmission with all the same quality controls and all the same scrutiny. Just like our air cleaners go through all the tests, the testing that the OE ones do, we produce these, manufacture these to the same level of scrutiny as the OE transmissions. So the blue is, a way that, it's a poke yoke method for identifying the or the King 6 transmission on the line that also has OE transmissions. So this, we developed this and we test this in tandem with the powertrain lab.
It was so interesting getting to hear what each of the engineers are working on or testing for and what these simulators do. And after they all got done talking, they gave us a chance to ask some questions of our own. I assume there's levels of difficulty with the roads that they're simulating. What would be the most aggressive simulation that you guys run? Like what would be that comparable to in our real world riding?
I guess comparable would be probably maybe running into a pothole.
Just like on and on and on, or just kind of just one really aggressive?
Potholes, I don't know, how often have you hit a pothole in your life?
Well, riding through Detroit was pretty rough.
So, we try to, like I said, part of the process that we've done is through customer surveys and stuff, we'll ask people like different degrees of road roughness, and then we've actually gone out and profiled those roads and then brought them in. Part of the thing as far as developing a durability test is you don't want to do something that's more aggressive than what the customer sees. So you're trying to find a balance between, you could definitely find a pothole or whatever that's, this deep or whatever, drive through it and destroy your bike in one pass. So trying to basically understand what that usage is and kind of from the worst case to smooth roads.
Like realistic.
Realistic.
Understood. Thank you.
And that depends on your failure mode of interest, right? So there might be that one pothole that creates more damage in, say, a swing arm or something at the rear of the vehicle, but really has very little impact somewhere else on the vehicle. So understanding the scope of your test and creating it and accelerating it just for those failure modes of interest is really important.
All right, thank you.
Sometimes the powertrain excitation just from running the engine at a constant RPM can be your worst case damage compared to even just the road by itself.
After wrapping up our tour of the structures lab, we all headed over to what would later be my favorite part of the day. We're heading over to the design lab.
I'm Bjorn Schuster. I'm Director of Design at Harley-Davidson Motorcycles. I oversee a team of designers who are responsible for shaping our products. I've been at Harley-Davidson for about 9 years. I've been in the field of industrial design since 2005, and I've worked for a variety of automotive and motorcycle companies over the course of my career.
The way we design products is it goes a little bit deeper. Our entire team each year travel to as many key motorcycle shows as possible. It's a way for my team to observe what's going on with our customers and our riders and really soak up like what's inspiring customers and riders. How are they using their products? Where are trends starting to shift? After understanding the customer, the next thing that is crucial is understanding the product. Harley didn't get to be over 120 years old by accident. Many of the products that we produce, it's tremendously steeped in legacy and they have a history. So if you're going to design a product, it's really super crucial that you understand where it came from. After you've gotten a little bit of an understanding and a basis for your customer and the history of the product, this is where you start to jump into a part of the process that's really fun for designers. This is the ideation stage. So upstairs, when we kick off a project like this, we'll have a wall that's probably twice as long as this, and the whole wall will be peppered with hundreds of drawings. This is just an example of what it might look like when you're getting to a stage where it's starting to become more refined. And we'll have a really open, collaborative critique process. So Brad and myself will work with the designers, and we'll be, discussing different themes or proposals. We might say, the fuel tank on this one is a little bit off, or the fairing is a little too angular, but we really like the shape of the saddlebag on this theme. And you go kind of through a down selection process here. The goal of this stage is to create a vector of ideas. So this image here shows you what an example of that looks like. So you're going from some ideas that fall into the traditional or conservative spectrum, all the way to things that are stretched and more advanced. Another way of saying it is thinking about it from like maybe mild to wild. And the goal of this, you have to understand what those bookends look like to know where your proposal or where your hypothesis of what the future product is going to look like. After we've kind of selected our theme, you go from the two-dimensional stage and you jump into 3D. And we use a variety of techniques to develop 3D. Some of it's developed with computer software, computer modeling in the tube, and then it's a combination of clay milling, and you're going to see some of that next door. So you're taking a two-dimensional idea and you're converting it to a three-dimensional form. And we'll use, some of that you'll evaluate on a computer screen, but there really is no replacement, even as advanced as VR technology is, where you put on the goggles and you can walk around in that kind of almost like a video game space and judge form. It's still not a replacement for seeing the actual physical property. And that's where clay comes in. So we will take a piece of data that was developed in the computer, and it'll get translated into a clay model, and it'll get milled, and then there's a back and forth process of hand working that product and milling it to realize what its physical shape looks like.
Okay, so this is extremely exciting for me. It's just so cool to see the process actually in action. We're in the clay mill room where they're actually creating a clay mold so that they can use that to further develop angles and aerodynamics and all sorts of fine details when developing the shape of a bike.
So how this process will start, the designer will have a bearing. Come in here and clay billet, which looks like this, is heated up in the oven. It'll look like a giant potato, just a big, round ball of clay. The 5-axis mill will then cut the data, and over the course of about 4 to 5 hours, stepping down to finer cuts and more detail, you'll end up with, we've milled a lowrider ST out over here. And that's the first time that the designer gets to see what their shape looks like in reality. And then what's unique about this methodology is it allows you to directly go back in and work by hand. So, if you come over here to so what's really nice about the clay process is it affords us a flexibility. So you could come in here and say, I think that this vent is a little too small. I want to make it larger. And then I can just carve away at the clay. What we'll do then, after we've modified it and made changes that we want to, we'll scan it, You can take that scan back into the computer, find the surfaces again, and then it'll get cut out again. So you'll come back the following day or 6 hours later, and you can see your changes. We will do that typically on a large surface like a fairing. It might go through 10 iterations. When we get to a stage where we're really happy with the proportions, we will then layer a film called Dyno. It's basically like a wrap. It allows you to see, because right now this allows us to judge the scale and the proportion, but it's sort of this uniform opaque color. When you put Dyno on, as long as the surface is smooth, it basically simulates paint. That's a real important process because some features may be too subtle, so you may discover like, all right, I need to pump that out a little bit to make it read more. When we're really happy with the final stage, then this will be converted to a hard model. This technique is really good for kind of judging proportions, having it show. It can be, they have a lifespan of about, a year or so, and then, if they're left outside, over time the clay starts to dry and crack up. Another thing that I've seen happen with these is sometimes you might use a model like this and it'll travel across the country, for research or for a show. And if it's not refrigerated, this gets really hot. So even when we're judging these outside during the summer, if we're having a review, you have to be careful. Like, okay, if we be out in the sun for about 45 minutes, too long, and I can stick my thumb in it. It's just like the other one, soft.
This is fascinating.
Typically, we'll only use the shavings.
I wasn't certain that they actually meant clay.
A grain of sand can be in. This machine, I could scan my face, and we could put a block of clay on roughly the same size as my head, and it will mill out exactly my face.
Have you done that?
I have not.
So where people go to the printer and just...
That'd be a cool fair.
This fixture in the middle of the room is just fascinating to me. This is the alternative to like 3D printing. Golly, this is like the coolest field trip of all time.
The most exciting part, or the most rewarding part of being a designer at Harley-Davidson is that you're not designing commodities. So when you see products that you've worked on and you see how much they're kind of embraced and loved by the riders and the customers, it feels like incredibly fortunate to be able to work on something that people hold in such high esteem. It's totally different than, say, working on something that's only a commodity, or it's a product, but it doesn't have any emotional connection with its user. So when I see people, there's thousands of people here this week that are here just solely for their passion for the bikes they ride and the product, and it's incredibly rewarding to be part of that.
I feel like knowing all of this behind the scenes information really helps me appreciate what I'm looking at, and like the passionate in me gets so giddy to see other people being so passionate. It was such a treat to get to be a part of this exclusive tour to see where the heartbeat of Harley-Davidson is created. Getting to speak to all these engineers and designers and these brains behind the products really opened my eyes to see how much passion goes into the work. As if this tour wasn't enough, Harley-Davidson even went above and beyond and fed all of us creators before and after the tour, and just overall, I'm blown away with the day. What a cool experience. Thank you, Harley-Davidson.